Hello there, and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. I am glad we are at the Proof of Work Summit in Frankfurt. Thanks to Bob for organizing this and allowing us to use the media room. And I'm sitting next to Orkun Kilic. You told me that it's pronounced as Kilic.
Kilic, yes.
Kilic. And he has some exciting news about Citrea. And what I've seen on Twitter basically is that people who were critics before, like Super Testnet and Robin Linus, they were saying, it's not really a ZK rollup, it's not using BitVM and stuff like this. And they came around and they said, there's something legit about this project. And I'm proud of it because some naysayers told me, I rushed too fast into this thing and it might be a scam. It turned out to not be a scam.
Yeah,
so welcome on the show again, Orkun.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think your podcast was the first one that we explained Citrea, and it launched on the date that we launched our brand, Citrea, come out of stealth. So yes, since then a lot of stuff changed, and also I think the perception against ZK rollups and what we are building is also changed, and that started with this podcast.
Yeah, so let me start with the basics. Maybe people are not aware. What is a ZK rollup and how is it different from a sidechain? Because for the longest time, the sidechain was the promise to scale Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the traditional definition, sidechain is another blockchain, just like another L1. Like in here, we have folks from Ethereum Classic or Litecoin, and they're totally independent blockchains than Bitcoin. And the sidechain idea was also a totally independent blockchain where you still use Bitcoin as the asset so that you can scale either for features or for more transaction per second. But it never taken off because there were a lot of problems with regards to their peg mechanism, for example. For years, I think the sidechain idea was from 2012 or something like that.
2015. 2014, 2015.
Yes, yeah, that probably the Blockstream white paper and stuff. And since then, we haven't moved forward at all with the peg mechanism or even the security of these chains because they're eventually an independent blockchain than Bitcoin. But the rollup idea was, I think, in 2018, Barry Whitehead, a researcher from Ethereum Foundation, put it. And he said, okay, we now have the ZK tech. And it was just all theory for years, and now it's practical because we have seen on Zcash or some other zero-knowledge projects. And he said, okay, let's then build an off-chain blockchain. So not like a side chain where you have another validators or another miners or another blockchain. You simply have a virtual blockchain, which doesn't actually exist independently. And that will let execute a bunch of transactions in there and creates a proof of execution with the ZK technology. And let's put the same data and the ZK proof to the L1 so that we can still have the L1 security and we can compress more transactions into this ZK circuit so L1 doesn't have to repeat that transactions. And with that mechanism, we can also have a very flexible and trust minimized two-way peg mechanism because now your L1 knows what's happening on the L2, which was previously impossible with sidechain idea.
Okay, so why does Bitcoin need a rollup? Because this was created for Ethereum scaling crisis. Mm-hmm. And this idea also bled into Bitcoin since the ordinal inscriptions came around. Yeah. I think that's when the idea first emerged.
Yeah, so rollups are started in Ethereum, but they're generic scaling solutions. Today, we even see it blockchains like Solana, which promise to bring security on the L1 in a monolithic way, but now they have rollups because it's a generic technology that's produced. And the idea is as long as you have some space on the L1 that you can put data, it's definitely more efficient than doing everything on the L1 because now we have a single computer processing everything, but that computer cannot steal money because there is a ZK proof protecting all the money. And the idea was a generic, and together with inscriptions, Casey, the founder of the inventor of ordinals, found a way to put more data to Bitcoin blockchain without changing Bitcoin blockchain. And the rollup idea is obviously coming from putting data to the underlying blockchain. So that's when actually these conversations started, whether you can build a ZK rollup on Bitcoin or not. But even before that, there was research from Eric Wall, John Light, and some other names, I think, started doing work on ZK rollups on Bitcoin because it's actually a very cool combination because we have the even though we have some kind of minor centralization today, it is still the most censorship resistant blockchain compared to the other blockchains. And rollups are safe blockchains that can also inherit censorship resistance from the base layer. So having a really strong base layer with a rollup that has, for example, single sequencer is the best combination, because you get cheap transactions, you get fast transactions, and you still have censorship resistance with the same level of Bitcoin.
Right. So with Citrea, what problem are you really solving and how?
Yeah.
Because it's not the traditional way or the conventional way of doing rollups. You came up with a different way to work around the limitations of Bitcoin.
Yeah. So when we started thinking about Citrea, it was, I think, maybe February, maybe March last year. So the idea was, this didn't come from scaling Bitcoin in terms of true output. It came from scaling Bitcoin in terms of features. Because back in those days, people were trying to do something with ordinals, like buying, selling ordinals, or lending, borrowing ordinals, which is extremely inefficient to do on L1. And this affects both sides of the community. Like for the real monitor use maximalist, now we are bloating the UTXO set, putting arbitrary data to Bitcoin, which they don't want. And on the other side, for ordinals users, this is a really bad user experience, because you have to do 3 to 5 transactions to even buy and sell ordinals, which is extremely inefficient. And our idea was, okay, let's build a rollup on Bitcoin where we can build a generic virtual machine, like an EVM, Ethereum virtual machine. We can embed it into Bitcoin without changing Bitcoin. So these people can actually do more powerful transactions with their ordinals. And we can keep UTXO set small on the L1 and put less data on the L1 than we should on individual basis. So it's, I think, a great combination for both sides, because we are solving the L1 congestion of ordinals, inscriptions, and other stuff. And for those users, we are also providing more opportunity to do something with their Bitcoin secured assets. So.
Oh, that's nice. But how does it accomplish this? Because if I understand correctly, it doesn't use BitVM in the ways that some people who are trying to also do ZK rollups were planning to do it.
So in a traditional definition, rollup is very independent from how we breach the base layer assets from to rollup, from base layer to rollup, or vice versa. So in a ZK rollup context, what we do is we have a generic virtual machine that is ZK proof, and we send proofs to the L1. So that all the full nodes of the rollup can just look at their Bitcoin core nodes and verify all the ZK proofs without Bitcoin script needed to verify the ZK proofs. But with BitVM, it solves another thing, which we want to use this Bitcoin in action on the rollup. We don't want to use other assets, for example. So BitVM solves this, and it solves in a way that it is trust minimized, not trustless, compared to traditional ZK rollup idea. So with BitVM, we can actually emulate a ZK prover, ZK verifier, with one-of and trust assumption. But in the traditional way, let's say if we have OPCAT, we can actually build a ZK verifier, and then we can have fully trustless ZK rollups built on Bitcoin.
As far as I know, Citrea has created the first ZK rollup on Bitcoin.
Yeah, we had the first product that said, okay, we are building a ZK rollup on Bitcoin, and we are the only one that released a fully featured testnet that's actually a Bitcoin ZK rollup, but we are not live on mainnet yet.
Not live on the mainnet. But I gotta ask you, how is it different from Alpen Labs, from all the others that emerged, if I'm not mistaken, after you launched Citrea? And there was this whole movement of bringing and creating your own L2. I think early this year, a bunch of them were created. I haven't heard too much from them since. That's why I cannot really name them.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive that you're still around with Citrea.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin layers is a great resource for it. You can review all the other layers. I think today there are around 70 or 80 projects that claims to be a Bitcoin L2, and also probably half of them says that they're a rollup. But if you look at the technology, it's not a rollup. So if I'm not mistaken, today we are the only real rollup that's working and has open source code base and on testnet or mainnet. There are some other promising teams that wants to build rollups or express it that they're building a rollup, such as Alpen, that we are friends with some of their team members here. But their product is not live yet, and as far as I know, their code is not open source. So I cannot verify whether they're building a rollup or not, but they're saying that they're building a rollup.
Yeah, I think it was Edan Yago from Bitcoin OS who said that they are
Yeah.
the first ones to verify a zero knowledge proof on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think they are like maybe the first one using their BitSnark kind of thing that verified a ZK proof. But building a ZK rollup and verifying a ZK proof is not very correlated. We have like internally two teams. One is working on the ZK verification on Bitcoin, and the other is working on building the rollup. And both teams are like more than like 8-9 people. So it's really like a lot of work to make it real. So yeah, it's I think a bit relevant, but they verified the first ZK proof with their framework. I think they claim to be, but it is not a rollup built yet. It is just a plain ZK proof verified on Bitcoin, which is probably a big milestone for them.
We talk about all of this fancy tech. We mentioned sidechains, we mentioned ZK proofs, verifiers, optimistic, rollups, whatever. But how can they be used by the average user? Because I guess there are a bunch of people who hold on to their Bitcoins and they look at all this space of trying to innovate use cases for Bitcoin and trying to scale it, and they don't really see how they're going to use it.
Yeah.
So what are the use cases that you envision for Citrea?
I think also you were the first that asked me this question in the podcast about like, okay, I want to use Citrea, what should I do? Because I
Ask
think
about wallets, I think. Which wallets?
Yeah, which wallets should I use? Like, I think in general, I sometimes assume that like people know how to use EVM wallets, which is not the fact, because like most
EVM what?
wallets,
Wallets.
like EVM compatible wallets. Most people here, for example, I met is like just using Lightning and like Bitcoin native wallets, which is not very similar user experience with like an EVM native wallet like we are going to use. So in our case, for example, compare with Lightning, and in Citrea you have an address that derives from your seed phrase, which is fully non-custodial that you own, and that address is not like an invoice. It's a really static address that you can share with anyone, and you can receive payments even if you are online, for example. So unlike Lightning, you don't have to create an invoice, send the invoice to the other party, and wait for the like sends the money. You shouldn't like just close the invoice and stuff. So you just have an address, and you can share it with anyone, and they can just send you the money, and you can receive it anytime. And you don't have to have inbound liquidity. The other person doesn't have to have like outbound liquidity. These are not the terms in the EVM. You simply have an account which has an address and a balance, and then you can send and receive transactions. But our rollup isn't specifically built for payments. It's a generic virtual machine. So in this virtual machine, you can actually upload smart contracts and execute transactions too. So when I mean smart contracts, I think most people are thinking about like token stuff and whatever, but in real world, there are a lot of examples that, for example, you may want to have like, you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, but you need cash because you have to pay your rent. And the only way to do it is go to a custodial lending desk, give them your Bitcoin, and they send you cash and you pay it. But who knows whether you can get your Bitcoin back. But in here, we can have a smart contracts that can do lending, borrowing Bitcoin, lending, borrowing stable coins or like fiat-pegged coins, whatever. And you can actually do that non-custodially without trusting any custodial counterparty. You can do private payments with smart contract. You can do lending, borrowing. You can buy Bitcoin in a non-custodial manner. You can hold Bitcoin-backed stable coins. So it is not just specifically for payments, but it covers a wide range of use cases that we believe is needed for Bitcoin's future.
Yeah, so basically for the average Bitcoiner, you can explain it as BlockFi, which was a service that went bankrupt because it did not have a proper business
Yeah, it's just
model. But it's like BlockFi on a smart contract. It's code that you can audit instead of a company that you must trust.
Exactly. It's a code that everyone can see and everyone can audit. And all the times you hold your keys, you don't, like, even though you deposit to a smart contract, that smart contract records that this is your Bitcoin. And if the other conditions never met, the Bitcoin never leaves that smart contract, so you can get it anytime back, depending on the implementation of these projects. But yeah, think about BlockFi, think about Coinbase, think about perpetual dexes, think about prediction markets. Just combine everything, and this is the infrastructure that we are building so that all of these applications can build in a non-custodial way on Bitcoin.
I think something interesting that maybe I haven't mentioned in our previous interview concerns the sponsors of my show, and two of them at least are competing with Citrea in different ways. So the first one that I want to mention is Layer 2 Labs, and they're building the Drivechain. Basically, they're trying to bring the sidechain in of shape that's close to what was promised back in 2014, 2015. And they're trying to basically have a sidechain for every use case. And in the way that you described Citrea, that you can have prediction markets, you can have smart contracts, it sounds a lot like the individual sidechains that you can have for Ethereum or for prediction markets or for assets like Namecoin and whatever. So do you think that you're competing with this proposal?
I think like in the Drivechain scenario, you can build application-specific sidechains, but some people will build EVM sidechains, and it will provide the same functionality with Citrea too. So in Citrea, you can even build like other blockchains connected to Citrea, and it can be application-specific. So functionality-wise, it is not so different, but security-wise, it is different because the Drivechain idea, if approved, assumes that miners are honest for approving Drivechain with troubles, and this is totally independent from they are being honest while mining Bitcoin. So I think it's a different trust assumption. The sidechain, like I said in the beginning, can never be an L2, like even though the Drivechain proposal accepted, because you always have a trust assumption to some other party other than the Bitcoin's consensus. So in the Drivechain idea, you have just regular Bitcoin consensus, plus you have that the miners that mine the last X number of blocks has to be honest, while they can be dishonest on there and they can be honest on Bitcoin mining, so you cannot even understand whether they are honest or not. So this is a different trust assumption that I don't like. In here, we have everything built into the Bitcoin consensus because we send all the data to the Bitcoin blockchain, not some other blockchain, and try to connect from there. Everything is just integrated with Bitcoin. And yeah, I think that's the main difference in terms of the security. But obviously, the Drivechain idea depends on a VIP, which means a soft fork. So I'm very suspicious that it will ever get accepted because it's been already like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 years that it's published and still has no significant support.
Well, it was not formalized as a BIP before.
Yeah, the idea was like, I think from 2016 and the BIP is from 2018 maybe.
But it wasn't seriously discussed because nobody felt like there was a need for it. And now they realize, okay, maybe
I don't know. Maybe like, have you ever seen like some new persons discussing it after all stuff? I didn't. I'm still just seeing like Paul talking about it and like some more people, like sometimes Robin and like Supertestnet, I'm seeing that they want, but it's not as significant support as like or Cat or CTV or even TakeSash.
But they can actually build the Drivechain on top of this covenant, but it will have different security trade-offs.
Yeah, even you can build a Drivechain with BitVM, but it will have a more trust assumption than the original Drivechain, which already has a trust assumption.
Yeah. So the other sponsor that I wanted to comment on and tell me how Citrea is different is Starkware.
Yeah.
And they're building the Starknet, which also uses zero-knowledge proofs.
Yep.
And right now they're on Ethereum, but they do require OpCap, as far as I know, to be able to deploy their system on top of Bitcoin. And how is that different from what you're doing?
Yeah, I think technically Starknet is like they're the inventor of the Stark proofs. Like, so obviously we have like a lot of respect to them for leading like this zero knowledge technology. But they're today live on Ethereum and not live on Bitcoin. And their plan is to have like multi-settlement kind of thing where they will settle on Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I don't think that's going to work well in like for social consensus. I think it's not a good idea to have like multi-settlement stuff because in case of a malicious fork of Bitcoin or Ethereum, you can just lose your assets because there will be two different blockchains if you are settling into two different blockchains. But this is a very deep technical, and I think the other difference is they are using another VM which doesn't have like that much usage.
Cairo?
Yeah, like they have a handful of applications which are some of them are really creative, but it still didn't take off despite they are being live in like the Cairo is being live in the last 3 years. I think EVM is a great tool for it because you have a bunch of developer like documentation, the videos, the guides, the hackathons that people can learn EVM and start building Bitcoin applications. And obviously the other advantage is we will be live today, even without an RP kit, so we don't depend on any soft fork, which is good to first bring the use case to Bitcoin and tell everyone that, okay, see, you can borrow Bitcoin without losing your custody. And now if people think that's a good idea and that's working, now they can approve a soft fork to make it fully trustless, like OPCat or some other soft fork. But I think first getting live and showing the use case to Bitcoiners is important for social consensus.
No, the coolest part about it is that they have no agenda, so they let me even criticize them in an interview with someone.
They're great people. Yeah, but obviously we had different technical choices than them because we think this is the better way of doing it. But obviously every team has some points for their decisions, which makes sense.
And with scaling Bitcoin, you always have trade-offs, and you have to pick whatever you're trying to optimize for, and you're going to lose the other one.
More options, better for community. They can just see us and see some other alternatives and decide on which one is the best, which one they want to support, and that's it. So better options, better competition, better products, and that's good for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and also have to mention the other two sponsors. You don't have to comment on them, but the first one is Sidechip.ai. So if someone pays you in stable coins, dump that. Just don't hold your stable coins. Get some free market money, swap it on Sidechip.ai. It has pretty low fees. They have a lot of liquidity and a lot of options for you. So if you prefer Bitcoin, you can take BTC. If you like Bitcoin on the rootstock sidechain, you can actually get that. If you want Litecoin or whatever, you can get that too. Just don't hold on to your stable coins. But if you do need stable coins and you want to swap your Bitcoin for that, I'm not judging. That's also an option. So check out Sidechip.ai and also hodling.ch. They are this company from Switzerland that's going to help you with your cold storage. They can give you all the training and all the consultancy necessary for you to set up the perfect multi-sig for your use case. Because when you determine your threat model, it's never the exact same. If you're a large holder who lives in a certain country, maybe you have a different threat model and they need to advise you on that one. Or if you're part of a company that's buying Bitcoin, maybe you need a multi-sig and you need multiple manufacturers of hardware wallets to provide this signature. And how are you going to distribute it? How are you going to manage it? That's also a good question. But they can help you with that. Check out hodling.ch. And they also provide this service if you lost your seed phrase and you only know a few words from it, they can try to brute force it to recover your funds. Of course, they take a fee for it, but it's better than having them lost forever. So check them out. Orkun, I was going to ask you, what do you envision as the future of Citrea? You have the current state of it, but how do you envision it getting so much better and basically enabling the hyper-Bitcoinization that we all want?
Yeah. So it's always a very long time goal that I can say because we have a lot of work to do. But after putting the mainnet out, we have plans to introduce decentralized sequencers, which will reduce the trust assumption on sequencer and also increase the censorship resistance of the layer. And together with it, we have plans to something called native account abstraction volition model, which will enable people to program their accounts with very low fees. So you can maybe make a smart account saying that, okay, stop me whenever I spend 0.01 Bitcoin this day. So you can also make that, okay, this person can claim this payment if I do this amount of spending in their merchant, for example. So you can program it in any way, and that's all in your control. Not even an extra smart contract. It is actually in your account. And the volition model is also make a way to transactions way more cheaper than putting them on Bitcoin SDA. It brings another trust assumption, which is the peer-to-peer network of Citrea, which I believe it will be very strong. But it provides an option to the users so that they can have extremely cheap transactions too. And the end goal is just not just a technical product, but obviously a use case. If you build all this stuff and we don't have any use case, then it means nothing. So there are a lot of builders on Citrea today trying to bring the major innovations for Bitcoin that was never available before, like Non-Custodial, all these platforms that I mentioned. it's still being built by other ecosystem players on Citrea ecosystem. So the end goal is to have all the applications ready for Bitcoiners to use with maybe varying trust assumptions, but everything should be non-custodial. And we also ready to serve as like the base layer for other creative applications too that requires like hyperspeed, maybe real-time TPS or whatever. But the end goal is to provide more use case to Bitcoin and just get rid of all the centralized and custodial solutions today.
Since I interviewed you 6 months ago, how would you say that Citrea improved?
Yeah. 6 months ago, Citrea was merely a design and then proof of concept code base that we had internally. Around that time, we did a fundraise before it actually, but we announced it later. And after that, we just announced all of our code base. So I think we are like only serious player today that has everything code available on GitHub, which people can review, they can make comments, they can even contribute, that we accept PRs, and there are a couple of people that's making PR to our core repositories as well. We are trying to contribute to everything we can, like the Bitcoin repository mainly, because it's also plays a critical role in our infrastructure. But other than that, we are just supporting research projects, research grants in like local universities to make more creative Bitcoin applications and also improve the robustness of the Citrea code base. And we released a DevNet and then the testnet, which is, I think, we get to that point really, really fast because we announced the product in February, and now in September we have a testnet, which is, I think, the team put a lot of effort to it. And the testnet is a great way to show that our Bitcoin usage, like how much data we are using in Bitcoin, how we are utilizing Bitcoin, what are the fees going to look like, which kind of applications that we can use. So it's probably the biggest milestone that we had so far. And the next up will be hopefully mainnet really soon.
We are here in Frankfurt at the Proof of Work Summit, and you had a presentation.
Yeah.
And what was it about, and how can people basically see your presentations around the world? Because I see that you're traveling a lot.
Yeah, so I did a presentation on hyper-Bitcoinization, just these topics that we all discussed, that how we can bring a Bitcoin-backed economy without going through centralized and custodial solutions. And it's all about experimenting with Bitcoin. And the major bets and experimentation we are doing is obviously Citrea. Then other than this, the next up, I will be in Prague for Hackers Congress. And then I will be in Bitcoin Amsterdam. And then I will be in Bitcoin Plus, which is very interesting. An eCash conference that I'm doing a presentation on why eCash is so bad and ZK is better. So it will be a very interesting crowd and interesting presentation.
Can I high five you for the part about eCash?
Yeah, like eCash was a great experimentation 40 years ago, but not anymore. We have Bitcoin, which is a better digital money, and now we are trying to convert it to a custodial solution again. Oh, I will just use small mints, I don't have risk, I will just use it for small payments. Like these all has like some kind of centralized and custodial vectors that push you in that way. Like the Lightning channel requirements, now we have eCash, and it's all just converged to the custodial solutions, which is the result of like either bad UX or like not having like the primitives to build them on directly on Bitcoin. So we are hoping to change this trend towards more non-custodial and decentralized future.
Does Citrea provide any kind of privacy benefits compared to just sending on-chain?
So Citrea has a full VM and smart contract, so people can build any private systems they want. They can build, I don't know, maybe exchange pools that is dark, or they can do private payments. Citrea is a public ledger, just like Bitcoin, but at least it's programmable enough to provide other primitives to do privacy.
So people can do something like Tornado Cash on Citrea?
I mean, yeah, they can do like any primitive. I'm not promoting for any of this, but obviously privacy is needed for the future, and people can build network extensions of Citrea, just like another layer on Citrea that has their own private VM, and they can do various settlement options. But yeah, it's just like we are just providing an infrastructure which is generic to everything and doesn't promote or demote anything, any use case. It was just a generic infrastructure that you can build anything you can imagine.
Last question before I let you go. If you could change anything about Bitcoin, add any BIP, any soft fork, any hard fork, what would you do to it?
That's an interesting question. I'm obviously I have a lot of bias on this, but I think a ZK opcode should be discussed like way earlier than this date, because Bitcoin has like a lot of problems about privacy, a lot of problems about verifiability, a lot of problems about small block space. ZK is obviously, I can understand, like relatively new technology. It is like older than Bitcoin actually. It's introduced in I think 1985. And the theoretical implementation, I think, in 2012 with zero cash. But I think like having a ZK opcode or like pay to ZK address in Bitcoin is really interesting because it can solve a lot of problems with privacy and scalability. So that's my biased answer. But I like Bitcoin. Like I like having also like this amount of like overwhelming consensus discussion as well. I wish like people just listen each other more carefully. But other than that, I'm happy that we are discussing multiple proposals and trying to choose the best and upgrade Bitcoin. Like, I don't know. I think we should upgrade like once in every 2 years. It should not take this long. But I think it's still better to like discuss everything in detail, including ZK opcodes and like which ones should we choose and stuff.
Thank you very much, Orkun. And good luck
thank you
with
very
Citrea.
much. Great discussion.
Hey, you. Thank you for listening.